It is much safer to be feared than loved when one of the two must be lacking. Niccolò Machiavelli. There's a moment, subtle, unspoken, where something inside you breaks. It happens not during a grand betrayal or public humiliation, but in the quiet places, when you apologize for existing, when you smile while being disrespected, when you nod just to keep the peace. And afterward, you can't quite explain the shame you feel, only that it lingers, that it sticks to you like a scent you can't wash off. You were told to be kind, to be liked, to be approachable, agreeable, digestible. You became a master of softening yourself, of choosing your words like you were diffusing a bomb. You traded authenticity for approval, instincts for etiquette, and people applauded your goodness while secretly walking all over it. You became the one who answers messages at midnight, the one who forgives before they've healed, the one who makes others feel safe, even when they're making you feel small. Because deep down, you thought being liked would lead to being respected. But it didn't. It led to being used. They don't tell you this part when you're growing up. That likability is often a leash. That approval is addictive precisely because it's unstable. That the more you chase it, the more it runs. You didn't notice it at first. The way people only call when they need something. The way your boundaries were seen as obstacles, not realities. The way you're so easy to talk to became a subtle way of saying, you never say no. Somewhere along the way, being liked stopped feeling like connection and started feeling like performance. And performance is exhausting. But here's the Machiavellian truth no one dares to whisper. You don't earn respect by being nice. You earn it by becoming unpredictable. The person who is always agreeable. They become invisible. The one who says yes to everything. Eventually, they're resented for having no spine. And the one who never commands attention, they vanish from memory. Meanwhile, the one who speaks less, but with precision, they are remembered. The one who says no without explanation, they become magnetic. And the one who does not try to be liked at all? Somehow, everyone wants their approval, because respect is not given to the agreeable, it's given to the sovereign. So let me ask you this. What if being liked has been the wrong game all along? What if the very thing you believed would protect you, your politeness, your goodness, your availability, has been the exact thing keeping you powerless? And what if there's another way? A way where you don't explain, don't shrink, don't smile when something inside you is screaming. A way where you stop being liked and start being respected. Welcome to the switch. And once it flips, everything changes. Stay with me. Because in the next part, we're going to expose the hidden cost of being the good one. And trust me, you've been paying for it with your soul. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. Niccolò Machiavelli. They told you, be kind, be polite, be agreeable, and you believed them. Because you were taught that being good meant being liked. That if you made yourself easy to love, people would stay. So you learned to soften your tone, shrink your truth, nod even when something inside you screamed, no. And yet, here you are, liked by many, but respected by few. Surrounded, but often invisible. The reliable one, the understanding one, the one who never causes problems. But here's what they never told you. Being agreeable is not the same as being respected. You show up for everyone, but who shows up for you? You hold space for others, but feel empty inside. You say yes out of fear, not alignment, and they don't notice, because they were never paying attention to you. They were addicted to your availability, your silence, your permission to cross lines you never dared defend. You became useful, predictable, easy to manage, and in return, they gave you just enough affection to keep you performing. But inside, you know the truth. You've been betraying yourself, politely. It starts small. You answer a message you didn't want to. You help with something you didn't agree to. You say, it's fine, when it's absolutely not fine. And over time, that fake smile becomes a mask you forget how to take off. You think, if I don't keep the peace, I'll lose them. But ask yourself, what kind of connection falls apart the moment you stop performing? The truth? They're not with you. They're with the version of you who never sets limits. Because people who only like you when you're quiet were never safe to begin with. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He wasn't promoting cruelty, he was exposing illusion. He knew that in politics, as in life, those who over-explain are devoured. Those who try to be loved by all end up ruled by those who aren't afraid to be disliked. You see it in history. Julius Caesar didn't hesitate when crossing the Rubicon. Queen Elizabeth I didn't apologize for wielding power. Even Gandhi's peace came from unshakable defiance, not people-pleasing. Meanwhile, you're still asking permission to rest, still defending your right to say no. But what if the real cost isn't losing them? What if it's losing yourself? Because here's the cruel irony. The more likable you are, the more invisible you become. And slowly you start to realize, being liked is not safety. It's just a more polite form of being used. So stop and ask, how many more "I'm fines" do you have left? How many more favors will you do for people who wouldn't even notice if you disappeared? How long can you keep smiling through your own silence? In the next part, we'll go to the root. Why you became this way. Why saying no feels dangerous. Why you confuse self-erasure with love. Because this didn't start today, but it can end now. We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become. Carl Jung. You weren't born afraid to say no. You learned it. The overgiving, the people-pleasing, the constant emotional labor. None of it came from goodness. It came from survival. As a child, maybe you spoke up and got punished. Maybe you cried and were met with silence or shame. Maybe you set a boundary once and love was withdrawn. So your nervous system learned a lesson. Don't upset them. Stay small. Stay safe. And since then, you've been managing people's moods like it's your job. At work, you take on extra tasks to avoid disappointing your boss, even when you're drowning. With friends, you check in constantly, fix problems, overextend, just so no one pulls away. In your family, you hide your real opinions to keep the peace. But that peace costs you everything, and all the while they call you kind. But let's be honest, how much of your kindness is just fear wearing a smile? Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we create to survive in a world that doesn't accept the full truth of who we are. But the problem with masks is, they don't come off easily. You wore it for so long, now you think it's you. Even now, part of you resists change, because setting boundaries feels wrong, saying no feels selfish, choosing yourself feels dangerous. And it is, to your conditioning. History has seen this pattern before. Rosa Parks didn't just defy a seat, she defied generations of silence. Frederick Douglass didn't just flee slavery, he shattered internalized obedience. Even Eleanor Roosevelt, once timid and overshadowed, had to unlearn her own invisibility to become a voice for justice. You too are standing at that edge. You're tired of being the one who always bends. But here's the truth. Breaking your pattern will feel like betrayal before it feels like freedom. The first time you say no, guilt will scream louder than logic. The first time you stop explaining yourself, you'll feel selfish. The first time you walk away instead of pleasing, you'll feel like the villain. But that discomfort isn't proof you're wrong. It's proof you're healing, because everything in you was trained to survive by self-erasure. But now, you're starting to remember, and in the next part, we enter the moment where the old mask finally cracks and something truer begins to breathe. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Niccolò Machiavelli. There comes a moment when the old script fails, when your smile doesn't work, when being nice doesn't protect you, when you say yes and still feel discarded, when you try to please and they leave anyway. And suddenly, the formula that kept you safe your whole life fractures. You're in a meeting, staying agreeable, yet your ideas are ignored. You reply to texts quickly, show up emotionally, give more than asked, and still, you're taken for granted. You explain your boundaries gently, and they push harder. And something inside you whispers, being liked isn't working. You feel the exhaustion of years of appeasement. The resentment you've buried under smiles starts to surface. You don't want to explode, but something's cracking. This is the reversal. Not because you decided to change, but because the role no longer protects you. You've spent so long seeking approval, you forgot how to be respected. Approval is cheap. It fluctuates. It's emotional weather, warm one moment, cold the next. But respect? That's earned through clarity, not compliance. Respect is what happens when you stop performing, when you say no without apology, when you don't explain your silence, when you carry yourself as if your time matters, and the shift begins small. You decline a favor you would have once accepted. You take your time to respond instead of rushing to please. You stop defending every decision with 3 reasons and a nervous laugh. At first, people react. They say you've changed. They call you cold, distant, difficult. But that's only because they were used to the version of you who never had a spine. That wasn't love. It was expectation. And the moment you deviate from the script, they panic. Think of Rihanna. When asked why she doesn't always smile in interviews, she said, "Because I'm not here to make you feel comfortable." That's respect. That's sovereignty. Keanu Reeves, private, elusive, rarely explains himself. But when he speaks, people listen. Why? Because he doesn't flood the room with charm, he brings weight. These aren't just celebrities, they're reminders. Approval wants you small. Respect requires that you stand. And you're beginning to stand, not to provoke, not to dominate, but because you've realized something vital. Being respected will never require you to betray yourself. So now, you're quieter, more deliberate, less available. And they don't know what to do with that, because the old you would have softened, explained, fixed it. But that version of you is gone. You don't even miss them, because in the space where your old self once begged to be liked, someone stronger is learning to be still. And that stillness, it's not emptiness, it's power. In the next part, we'll step fully into it, into the moment where you stop escaping yourself and meet the person who no longer needs the world's applause to feel real. I care for myself. The more solitary, the more friendless, the more unsustained I am, the more I will respect myself. Charlotte Bronte. There's a strange discomfort in no longer abandoning yourself. It's quiet, subtle, not dramatic. You don't storm out of rooms. You don't shout, "I'm done." Instead, one day, you just don't answer right away. You don't over-explain. You don't soften your no with 3 polite excuses. And for the first time in your life, you don't feel guilty. That silence, the one you used to fill with apology and availability, becomes your sanctuary. At work, you stop being the first to volunteer. You let the awkward silence play out in the meeting instead of rushing to rescue it. And oddly enough, people start listening when you do speak. With friends, you say, "I don't have space for this right now," and log off. No long message, no emotional labor, just presence, rooted and clear. With family, you stop performing stability. You don't cushion your honesty anymore. You say what you need, not what will keep the peace. And at first, it feels foreign, because approval always gave you a dopamine hit, a quick high for self-erasure. But now, you're not chasing approval. You're anchoring into something slower, heavier, truer. Respect. And it's not just others who begin to respect you, it's you. You hold your own time with reverence. You answer when you're ready. You help when it's aligned, not when it's expected. You no longer confuse silence with danger. Now silence means you're centered, and people notice, not because you're louder, but because you're no longer leaking. You're not throwing your energy out, hoping someone catches it. Think of Michelle Obama. She doesn't rush, doesn't overcompensate. She speaks like someone who has nothing to prove. Or Keanu Reeves, deliberate, understated, unavailable to the chaos of approval. People don't just like him. They respect his stillness. Why? Because it's rare. Because in a world begging for attention, a person who doesn't chase is magnetic. And now you're becoming that person. Not hard, not bitter, but solid. You don't flinch when someone's disappointed. You don't twist yourself into versions to be understood. You don't explain your value. You live it. There's a moment when someone tries the old pattern with you, interrupts, guilts, pushes, and you just look at them. Calm, steady, silent. Not as a tactic, but because you no longer negotiate your self-respect. You don't need them to agree. You don't need them to stay. You're not trying to win the room anymore, because the moment you stopped performing, you became real. And real people don't chase approval. They radiate clarity, and clarity draws respect. In the next part, we go deeper into this clarity, not as a concept, but as a way of being. How you move, how you speak, how you choose, not for survival, but for sovereignty. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you stop, and what you reinforce. Tony Gaskins. Respect isn't something you demand with words. It's something you broadcast with energy, behavior, and presence. And now you begin to live that, not hypothetically, not philosophically, in your actual life. You're in a meeting. The usual voice cuts you off. Old you would have laughed it off, made room, shrunk. But now you pause, you hold your tone, and you say, I wasn't finished. You're at a dinner. The conversation shifts towards subtle jabs or dismissive jokes. You don't play along. You meet the gaze, unfazed, and say nothing. And in that silence, they feel it. This is how respect begins, not with dominance, but with dignity. You don't punish, you don't prove. You simply stop rewarding behavior that insults you. You reply slower, speak less, but with more weight. You don't explain your boundaries, you embody them, and they either rise to meet you or fall away. This is the cost, but also the filter, because the more you live in alignment, the more your life becomes a mirror, reflecting who respects you and who only tolerated your compliance. Think of Taylor Swift. Once media-trained and palatable, she shifted. Now she reclaims her narrative, names exploitation, owns her space without asking permission. She's not chasing likability, she's rewriting the terms of engagement. Or consider Denzel Washington, measured, calm, never over-explaining. He doesn't need to overextend, his presence speaks first. That's the energy of someone who knows where he stands. And now, so do you. In friendships, you no longer carry dead weight. If they only come to vent, use your presence, ignore your boundaries. You stop showing up, not to hurt them, but to stop hurting yourself. In love, you don't beg for effort. You don't decode mixed signals. If someone's unsure, you're sure, for both of you. You no longer chase clarity from others. You become it. Even in solitude, you no longer call it loneliness. You call it alignment. Because this new version of you doesn't measure worth by attention. You measure it by integrity. You stop tolerating what exhausts you. You stop over-explaining. You stop asking, was that okay? After simply existing. Because now, your life is built on a quiet rule. If it costs you self-respect, the price is too high. And when you live that way, you don't just change your relationships. You change your entire reality. In the final part, we'll return to the beginning, but as someone different, not someone liked, someone whole. I will not adjust myself to the world. I am adjusted to myself. Annius Nin. You return, but not to them. You return to yourself. The version that existed before the world convinced you that love was something to be earned. Before you were trained to smile through disrespect. Before your silence became your identity. Now your silence means something else. It's not fear, it's self-possession. You don't rush to fill the space anymore. You don't perform softness to be safe. You don't twist to fit into rooms not built for your wholeness. At work, you hold eye contact when challenged and speak only when needed. You don't chase being seen. Your presence commands attention. In friendships, you no longer compete for closeness. You've stopped being the emotional janitor for people who ignore your mess. In love, you no longer accept crumbs of affection in exchange for your full heart. You know now, a connection that requires your silence is not intimacy, it's control. And yes, there are fewer people around now, but the ones who remain, they speak your language: respect, directness, presence. Like Viola Davis, never rushed, never apologetic. When she speaks, it's from a place of full ownership. She doesn't chase admiration, she embodies worth. Or Morgan Freeman, measured, steady, unbothered by noise. He doesn't demand the room, he is the room. This is what you've become. Not louder, but heavier. Not hard, but whole. The people who once fed on your overgiving no longer know where to plug in. There are no easy emotional access points left, because you've locked the doors you used to leave wide open. And in doing so, you've found peace. Not the peace that comes from keeping everyone happy, but the kind that arrives when your own nervous system finally exhales. Because now, you're not performing. You're not adjusting. You're not waiting for permission. You walk into rooms like someone who belongs, not because they let you in, but because you stopped asking. Your power isn't aggressive. It's anchored. You don't need applause. You don't need agreement. You don't need to be liked. You are respected, first by you. And that sets the tone for everything else. So here, at the end, there's no climax, no victory speech, just a quiet knowing. You didn't lose anything by becoming this version of yourself. You only lost the need to beg for crumbs. Now you speak less, but mean more. You give less, but from overflow. You stay less, but when you stay, it's felt. You are not a role, not a mask, not a character they get to rewrite. You are the author now. And this is not your revenge arc. It's your return, not to who they wanted you to be, but to who you were before the world trained you to disappear. No final line, no performance. Just this: you walk differently when your worth no longer wavers. You don't need to be louder. You need to be clearer. If this video met you where you've been hiding, subscribe for more truths that don't flatter, but free you.